So I said right before we paused there with regard to the idea of Joe Lacob having more say. I don't know. Like I think that's unnerving, and it's not because I don't think Joe's an incredibly good owner or smart guy. I think he is those things. I just think that in every business, in every family, whatever, you need those sort of yins with yangs. You need the blend. And if Joe is going to be type A and tough and forceful, damn it, we're going to win. We're going to win. Doesn't matter what the rules are. We're going to win. And then Bob is over here going, okay, now we're going to do this with a soft touch. Do you have the soft touch anymore? That's my question. Who's going to bring the soft touch that's necessary? You look at any great locker room. It's funny now to watch the Scottie Pippens of the world fall apart and totally implode with new content about how Michael Jordan apparently was a terrible basketball player. But that's what happens way after the fact because they didn't get along. But the truth of the matter is their locker room probably doesn't work if either of them are not there because you needed people. Steve Kerr was probably one of them at times. You needed people to counterbalance Michael Jordan's too much power, right? Too much type A.
Well, Phil Jackson was the Zen master. So if it wasn't for Phil Jackson, I don't think that thing holds together. The ability to bring in Dennis Rodman late in that run to mix with Michael Jordan and have that work. And he had Horace Grant and then Charles Oakley, strong personalities. Scottie Pippen was never a strong personality, but you made it work with he and Michael Jordan. You made it so that Michael Jordan could kind of run roughshod over everyone, but he Zen mastered it so that everybody felt like the team could still be cohesive. And that's what this was with Draymond Green in many ways, with Bob Myers, I think.
888-957-9570. How is this hitting you in terms of how big of a loss was this for the Warriors today? I just think it was a big one. I said early in the show, I think they lost their glue. I find him irreplaceable. It doesn't mean they can't play basketball without him. He scored 0 points during this whole thing. So they can play basketball without him. But whatever role he played and however you want to describe it, there isn't anybody else who can do it. And that makes him important, and it makes him irreplaceable.
And I think that what you're talking about, for me anyway, is the Draymond Green aspect of it. Because I don't know if Bob needs to do anything for Steph Curry to have Steph Curry play and be the player that he was going to be and the player that he's been. When I hear what you're saying about Bob, what I am hearing you say is Draymond Green. Because Klay Thompson, yes, the compassion Bob showed for Klay was important. The love he showed for Klay when he got hurt was important. And he might have been at the forefront of the decision to give Klay millions and millions of dollars, even though he wasn't going to play. And that was a beautiful gesture. Ultimately, Joe Lacob had to sign off on that. But when I hear you talking about Bob Myers as the glue guy, I think primarily about Draymond Green. Because Steph Curry, at this point in his career, is as established as he's going to be. I don't know if the new GM needs to come in and handhold it all for Steph Curry.
Let me give an example, though. I don't disagree with you, but let me give you an example that actually happened this year. If there's no Bob Myers, how does the organization conduct the Andrew Wiggins situation?
I don't know. Maybe the same way.
Maybe. But again, in order to pull something like that off, where we still sit here today with, at minimum, questions about what happened, there needs to be a give and take. There needs to be a respect. There needs to be a soft hand. That's a soft hand situation, not a hard one. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, Lacob feels like the kind of guy, and I'm sure he's got a soft side, but Lacob feels like the kind of guy that will walk in and be like, come on, what is it? Let's do it. Get to work. What's going on here? There needs to be a soft hand in those situations. And there needs to be someone who has the give and take with the media to be like, look, this is where we need this to go, and I need you to be along the ride with me. I give you something down the road. If not, you give me something down the road. Like, there needs to be that relationship, or else somebody's going to find something out and roll with it. And now the whole thing falls apart because Andrew didn't want it public.
Yeah.
All right?
That's a good point.
I think that Bob plays a huge role in moments like that, and I don't know who's going to do it now.
Well, Bob has the ability to do that because he won 4 championships. If he didn't have 4 championships under his belt, I don't think that he gets the same leniency, and I'll use the word leniency from the media, because in other markets, 4 championships wouldn't have mattered. He wouldn't have gotten that level of leniency that this media showed, and the grace and the class that the media showed, and the grace and class that Bob showed in telling you basically what Andrew was doing without telling you what he was doing. All Bob was saying is, Andrew's dealing with something very personal, and we support him during this time, and I hope that you'll support the fact that we are supporting him, and that's really all I can say, and that's all you need to know. And he was given that grace by the media because he's been so forthright over the years. So your description of a soft hand is a good one, and a soft hand was needed in that situation. But at the same time, the soft hand that he used in the Draymond Green situation at the start of the year, maybe that's where you needed a hard hand.
Yeah, that's a good point, too. That's a good point, too. Like, were the Warriors compromised in moments where tough love was needed? You can make that case. I bet Jordan Poole would make that case.
Right.
Yeah,
and Draymond
fair.
Green, I don't know if Draymond Green would actually come out and say it, but he said on the TNT broadcast that he messed it up until February. He didn't have his voice back. So I wonder if Draymond Green would ever have the ability to come out and say, yeah, they should have suspended me. I should have sat for 5 or 10 games. That would have showed me, that would have taught me a lesson.
I mean,
or maybe that would have cleared the air in the team, because whatever the team did, it didn't work because Draymond didn't have his voice until February.
It depends on, I guess, what their goal was. If their goal was to make sure that Draymond was there for ring night, then it worked.
Right. Right.
But yeah, if the goal was to save Jordan Poole from himself and within the team, maybe it didn't work. However, we don't know what would have happened if they had done it the other way. What if they had done it the other way and Draymond had been sideways or gone the whole year?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think a fun question, maybe not fun, that's the wrong word, but an interesting question might be, let's say that had happened and Bob Myers was not the general manager. What do the Warriors do? Doesn't it feel likelier that Draymond gets suspended?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think
and
so.
I don't even know whose voice was what behind the scenes, but Bob and Draymond have such history, and he navigates his way through. When Draymond needs to get set straight, he kind of talks him away from emotional situations, whatever it may be. And so whenever there's a Draymond issue, it feels like Bob is at the center of it. And so when they come out and they're like, yeah, he's going to be away from the team for a week or whatever, and then we're just going to move forward, it feels like Bob had a heavy voice in that. He was the one who passed that news along to everybody.
Right.
So I wonder.
Bob and Steve and Steph all out there on the dais that day.
And Looney.
Right. Not happy about having to be out there in that circumstance, but it's a decision they made, and we'll never know if going the other way would have helped or hurt. You make your decision, you stick with it, and you ride it out, and that's where, we talked to Bob in the preseason. I think we talked to him after that incident. In fact, it must have been.
Oh, no doubt.
After that, when we were down there at Chase Center.
Absolutely it was. This was right before the season started.
Right, and that happened a few weeks before the season.
Yeah.
So, and Bob was already circumspect over, focus on this year, don't worry about the future. So I wonder how much having to start his year with that played into his reluctance to return.
I'm sure it was plenty stressful. Bobby in Los Altos here on Willard and Dibs. Hey, Bobby, what are you doing?
Just on 101, but I wanted to share a couple thoughts on Bob Myers, or actually on the new GM. So I think you said it perfectly. Glue, or I'll call it interpersonal relationships that he had with the Big Three, I think were Bob's greatest asset. So when the team was in crisis, he was sort of the consigliere, if you will, to the Big Three. So from a continuity standpoint, I feel like it has to be Dunleavy that's going to be the new GM. I just cannot see Kurt Lacob being the new GM, and the main reason is if this thing falls apart, generally you're going to blame the owner or the GM. Mm-hmm. But I don't think Lake wants to have a Lacob double doink. So you need to have someone outside of the Lacob family maybe take a hit? I mean, we always talk about who's the next point guard going to be for the Warriors. Who wants that role after Steph retires or leaves or whatever the case may be? The same thing is, like, you're not going to be able to equal what Bob has done. So it's almost like this next, whoever takes that spot is really in a no-win situation, and I wouldn't want my son to have that. Now, once things go awry and everyone blames Dunleavy, then maybe, you can bring in Lacob if that's his aspiration to be the GM. But otherwise, I just can't see them going outside the organization for continuity purposes, at least until, the big three are done. And then, again, I would never put my son in that situation.
Well, Bobby, I think, you make a fair point.
And a better call than what you offered on Steiny and Guru, too.
Why,
well done.
I didn't hear what he said.
A little bit more negative on Bob. It was a call that came in before the press conference. Bobby running it back,
okay,
which I appreciate.
That's fine. You call on your way somewhere and then call on your way back.
No doubt.
You can do that.
Much better call. A little bit more of a looking ahead tone. I think he's right in terms of you don't want to be the guy after the guy. You want to be the guy after the guy after the guy.
I agree with you. However, I also think there's a secondary point to this. It is not setting up Kirk to fail. Maybe put in someone who you've already said is unpopular with the fan base to begin with. I'm not disagreeing. I just don't think I think enough time has passed and it's a different gig. So I just don't think it's that big of a deal. But here's the other side. The bottom line is it's not a good look to replace a beloved figure with your family member. It just isn't. It doesn't even matter if what I'm saying is unfair. Kirk, we've talked to him. I think Kirk's delightful. I think he's had a voice in all of this, so he gets credit too. No question about that. But if there's anybody moving out of this going, man, Bob and Joe battled, and then Joe gave the job to his son, there's no way that some people aren't going to be cynical. There's just you can't do it. It doesn't matter if it's fair or not. The bottom line is you're going to hear people scream nepotism. You just are. And
even if he was the most qualified guy in the pool.
Doesn't matter.
Even if he had 15 years as an NBA GM elsewhere and you were bringing him home, you still would feel criticism.
I mean, okay, let's play with this just for a second, and this can be completely fake. Mike Shanahan is the head coach of a football team, right? He's got an offensive coordinator, and they go on off they go, man. They go on 10 years of really, really good football. And then that offensive coordinator is like, man, I'm thinking I'm going to step away. I'm going to retire. But there are rumors underneath the surface that Mike Shanahan and said offensive coordinator also at times battled, right? And they just, didn't always get along. It wasn't perfect. They don't necessarily see eye to eye, but he's beloved. We made him an offer. He didn't want it. He moved on. Okay. Said beloved offensive coordinator whose team has led the league in scoring 5 out of the last 7 years moves on, and Mike Shanahan goes, here's our new offensive coordinator. This is Kyle Shanahan. Come on.
It's nepotism.
Nobody's going to like that. Again, he could do a great job. Nobody's going to like that.
This is a little different because you're the owner and you can do whatever you want. And he has been in the front office. He has been in a role. He's been on the team. And so
he's qualified.
Right.
He's been sitting there in the GM's office doing stuff.
Correct.
For years.
Doing GM stuff.
Yes. He's
GMing.
Totally qualified.
So from that standpoint, there is less backlash, but the very fact that he carries the last name Lacob, there will be major backlash, especially in light of, not that Bob Myers got forced out. I think that's a misportrayal of this situation, but Bob Myers is leaving and he's been popular and successful. And if the replacement is somebody from your family tree who ostensibly steps over somebody who was the assistant in that spot and should have the first crack at the gig, that's a bad look. People are always going to sort of look for things. And I think people will backtrack if it's Kirk Lacob. People will backtrack and go, oh, Joe kind of forced Bob out. Even though he had the
lucrative offer on the table and all of that stuff. The phrase you just used there at the end is kind of what I was thinking. In other words, I look at this the same way I look at Draymond hugging LeBron. You didn't like it. I don't necessarily care. I don't think it's inappropriate. I don't think hiring Kirk Lacob would be, quote, inappropriate. But sometimes, whether it's fair or not, things come off to many people as a bad look. I would put this in that category.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. And it's always going to be a bad look when you're trying to replace somebody like Bob Myers. And some people will look at Mike Dunleavy Jr. and say, oh, this is a bad look. The guy, he didn't do anything but sit around and say, Bob, you're right. Yes, sir, Bob. And he had an NBA career that was a bust because he was a number 3 pick, and he didn't do anything as a Warrior. And I hated him as a player, and I hate him now. Hate. So there's going to be that faction of people no matter what. I don't know if there's a person out there you could hire short of Steve Kerr, who told us on this very program, I don't want the gig. But if you elevated Steve and then moved Kenny Atkinson into the head coaching spot, or, whatever you did, if you matriculated it that way, I think that would be the best way to avoid it being a bad look.
I think it's going to be Dunleavy. That would be my guess. But let's take a moment, instead of thinking about who is going to fill the job, what is the job? And this is why it's a prickly spot. And why, you had some fun. You brought up Izzo. Like, to me, if you're someone who actually has GM experience, if you're someone who would be a candidate for many GM jobs around the league, you don't want this gig right now. How can you win? First of all, you walk in, and anything that happens next year or two, you're not getting credit for it. That's not on your watch. You didn't draft Steph. You didn't draft Draymond. You didn't draft Clay. You didn't re-sign them. You didn't navigate that. You're just coattailing it. Now, the other half of the job, this next GM will be judged on how quickly they can prepare the Warriors for the post-Steph, Clay, Dre era. That's how the next GM is going to be judged. And that's a really hard job. Because, let's be honest, in the NBA, there's some luck. There's luck involved in being good in the NBA.
Minnesota.
I mean, you have to hit on the number 11 pick in the draft or the number 7 pick in the draft. Other people have to make the wrong selection.
Sure.
Johnny Flynn. And then you get Steph Curry.
Ricky Rubio.
And off you go. And yes, you do a lot of things to augment and figure it all out. I'm not stealing credit from anyone. The Warriors over the last 10 years have made unbelievable move after unbelievable move, way outweighing the moves that they've made that have gone wrong. But it's hard, and you need luck. What's the evidence of that? Well, let's take a look at the last few first-round draft picks. How we doing? It's not that easy to have a lottery pick and just make a transformational pick. It is way more often that you miss. Bob joked today when they're like, are you doing the draft? He's like, I wasn't very good at it anyway.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's how this next GM is going to be judged, which means they're starting at the back of the pack.
No, you're screwed, is what it means. So you get a 5-year deal. Either it's Kirk Lacob, Mike Dunleavy Jr., or fill in the blank outside candidate or third-party candidate, Ross Perot, who knows who it's going to be. And you get a 5-year deal. In the next 5 years, you're going to say goodbye to Steph, Clay, and Draymond almost with a certainty. Steph has 3 more years. Clay's got 1. Draymond with a player option. Who knows how long those 3 are there. So you say goodbye to the big 3 that you didn't have any part of bringing in, and you either hold on to Poole, Kuminga, Moody, and the other youngsters and hope they turn into something. And even if they do, well, you didn't draft them. All you did was not trade them. So what happens in the next 5 years that you can do? The only thing that saves you is you find the next Steph or Clay or Dre, or maybe you find all 3. Well, if you don't do that, Mark, in 5 years when your contract is up, and even if those guys are all good players, Rollins and PBJ and all the rest of them, well, you didn't draft them anyway.
Yeah, if the baton gets passed somehow, then you're going to get mad credit, right? If you can somehow keep this train moving in the post era, then you're going to get unbelievable credit.
Or if you can bring in like a Giannis via a trade or something crazy.
I just remind people how hard that is to do and how rare that is, that after a run of greatness, you seamlessly hand a baton. In fact, we started the year talking about 2 timelines, and now most people laugh it off because it is incredibly hard.